Welcome to Gemara Academy. In this class, we will learn from Masechta Shabbos the Gemara and the Dalet Amud Aleph. Let's begin. In the previous Gemara, we presented the question of Bibi Bar Abaya. Bibi Bar Abaya asked if somebody placed dough in an oven on Shabbos, and then afterwards realized his mistake. The question is, did we permit him to remove it from the oven before it bakes and it comes to an Issa Torah or not? The issue is that removing bread from the oven is Asr M'D'Rabbanan. So did the Rabbanan remove their Isser and allow this individual to remove the bread so that it doesn't come to an Issa Torah? Or did the Rabbanan leave their Isser in place even though it'll lead the person to come to an Issa Torah? The Gemara now will question what exactly was this dilemma of Rav Bibi Bar Abaya. What was he asking? Because if we look at it, it doesn't really seem to make any sense. Gufa, the thing itself that we taught. Boy Rav Bibi Bar Abaya. Rav Bibi Bar Abaya asked, Hidbik Pas Batana, if somebody attached dough into the oven, did they permit him to remove it before he comes to a Chiyuv Chatas? Or did they not permit him? So the Gemara asks, Rav Acha Bar Abaya asked Ravina, Hey Chidami, how is this case exactly? If you look at it, there's no way to explain this case that it should make any sense. What exactly were the circumstances in this case that we could explain them in a way that Rav Bibi's question would make sense? Let's look at it and see how there's no interpretation that would work. If you're going to tell me that it was the individual put the bread in by mistake, he never realized his mistake. He put it in and he never realized. Who are they asking, should we make it mutter? Is it mutter for him to take it out? Is it not mutter? Who is the person that we're asking if it's mutter for him? This individual never realized his mistake. So is it not that he afterwards did remember? The hadar means like returned. He came back and remembered. So would it be chayav achatas? The question is, did they permit him to remove it before he comes to a Chiyuv Chatas, or did they not permit him before he comes to a Chiyuv Chatas? There's no Chiyuv Chatas here. But we learned in the Mishnah, Kol Chayav V'Chatois, all those that are Chayav, Carbon Chatas, Einan Chayav and not Chayav, Ad Sheteheh, until it is Tchilosim B'Shgaga, the beginning of their Aveh needs to be B'Shegig, V'Seif and Shgaga, and the end needs to be B'Shegig. So therefore, this individual, if he realizes his mistake, he's not a Shegig anymore. So he wouldn't be Chayav of Carbon Chatas. So if he was a Shegig throughout, so there is a Chiyuv Chatas. But then who's the question about? Did they permit him? Did they not permit him? Who's the him? This individual never realized his mistake. If he realized afterwards, so the question is, did they permit him? But the question wouldn't make any sense, because did they permit him before it comes to a Chiyuv Chatas? There is no Chiyuv Chatas. Ela b'mezid, rather you're going to tell me that it's a case of mezid, that he did it on purpose? Before he comes to an Isur Skila, is what they should have said. So the question is, hey Chidami, how is this case? If we look at it, there's no interpretation of the story here that will make sense and fit into the words of Rav Bibi Bar Abaya. So that's the question that Rav Acha Bar Abaya asked. Omer Rav Shila said, he answered, Lo'elam b'shegig. In truth, it's a case that he did it b'shegig. Well, Laman hitiru, and for who is the question? Did they make it mutter if this individual shegig throughout? That means he never realized his mistake. So then who are they making it mutter for? Did they make it mutter for him, or did they not make it mutter for him? Who's the him? La'acher, referring to others. In other words, if an individual put dough into the oven by mistake on Shabbos, didn't realize his mistake, and he went off somewhere, and another person came and saw the dough in the oven, and he realized what the other individual did. Is he allowed now to remove it from the oven so that his friend doesn't come to an Isser Torah? Could he do an Isser D'Rabbanan so his friend doesn't come to an Isser Torah? Or do we say the Isser D'Rabbanan should remain in place, although his friend will come to an Isser Torah? So that's the answer that Rav Shila gives. Ask the Gemara. Maskif la Rav Sheshes. Rav Sheshes asked, V'chi oimrim loy la adam chatei. Do we tell a person to do an avera kedei sheyiska chavercha, that his fellow should benefit? Do we ever tell somebody, do a Isser D'Rabbanan so somebody else shouldn't get an Isser Torah? If a person has an Isser Torah that's going to develop. So the question is, do we now permit him to do an Isser D'Rabbanan so it doesn't come to an Isser Torah? That's a valid question. But to ask, should one person do an Isser D'Rabbanan, when for him there would be no other Isser? As far as he's concerned, there would be no Isser here whatsoever. Do we permit him that he should do an Isser D'Rabbanan so that his fellow avoid an Isser D'Torah? Rav Sheshes asks, he's of the opinion that we most certainly would never ask such a question. Obviously, we would not tell one person to do an Isser, even though it's Isser D'Rabbanan, so that somebody else benefit and not do another Isser, even though that Isser is Minatero. Elo Amar Rav Ashi, rather Rav Ashi said as the answer, Lo'elam b'mezid, in truth the case is that he did it on purpose. Ve'ema, and say, in the questioner Rav Bibi Bar Abaya, Koydem sheyaveh l'dei Isser Skila. Did they permit him to do it, not before he comes to a Chiyuv Chatas, but rather before he comes to an Isser Skila? So change the wording. So we have two answers here. One is that it's talking about shegig, and it was shegig throughout. And the question is, did they permit others? And now we have the answer of Rav Ashi, that it's a case of mezid, and the question of Rav Bibi is, did they permit him to remove it before he comes to an Isser Skila? Now the Gemara goes and presents a supportive teaching to this. Rav Acha bar Rava masni la behedya. Rav Acha bar Rava actually taught this openly and clearly. So two things were open and clear. Number one, that the issue at hand is mazid. Number two, it wasn't presented as a question of Rav Bibi, but rather as a teaching from Rav Bibi. Let us see. Omar Rav Bibi bar Abaya. Rav Bibi bar Abaya said, Hidbik pas batana, if an individual attached dough in an oven, he tirur leiler day, so they permitted him to remove it from the oven, koydem sheyavor the day iser skila, before he comes to an iser skila. And with that we're done this piece of Gemara. So to summarize, we had a question. Rav Bibi asked, do we permit an individual to remove bread from the oven and do an iser midrabanan to avoid a later iser minatera or not? The Gemara asked, how is this case? There's no way to interpret this case that it should make sense. If he did it b'shaygig and then realized his mistake, if he did it b'shaygig and never realized his mistake, then who's the question? Did we permit him? Did we not permit him? Did the person never even realize his mistake? If he did it b'shaygig and then realized his mistake, then the question doesn't make any sense. Did we permit him to remove it before he comes to a chiyuv chatas? There is no chiyuv chatas, since a chiyuv chatas is only there if the person never had a state of awareness. This person came to realize his mistake. And if we'll say that he did it on purpose, b'mezid, and the question is, did they permit him to remove it before it bakes? So he realized it. The whole thing's b'mezid. But then Rav Bibi asked, before he comes to a chiyuv chatas. That's not a chiyuv chatas. If a person did it on purpose, that's an issue of an iser skila. The Gemara presented two answers. The first answer was by Rav Shilai, that it was done by mistake, and the mistake was from the beginning to end, a shaygig, and therefore there is a chiyuv chatas. The question is, did they permit another individual to do an iser midrabanan to help his fellow not to come to an iser tera? And on that we had a question from Rav Sheshis. He disagreed with this answer of Shilai, saying there's no question that we would never permit somebody to do an avera. We would never tell somebody to do an avera midrabanan in order to benefit his fellow, even if that's an iser tera that his fellow will then have. And we presented the answer of Ashi that he did it b'mezid, and we should change the question of Bibi, did they permit him to remove it before it comes to an iser skilla? And then we mentioned that this interpretation that it's an iser skilla, we actually learned that said it's straightforward, and actually not as a question but as a teaching, that if somebody placed bread in the oven on purpose, on Shabbos, we permitted him to remove it before he comes to an iser skilla.